it. But this is Feyerabend's Perspectivism in Studies in the History and Philosophy of Science by Ronald and Giere. And this is from 2015, so it's about 10 years old. But, I mean, this is a sort of a historical paper, so it's not like things change too fast in the history of philosophy. Now he says, I cannot assume either way to say appearances and its cut. Well, there you go. So why does there have to be one? There doesn't have to be one, but that's a hard question. So, like, that would be something worth investigating. And people argue about, like, appearance and, like, things in itself, or is this even the right way of approaching the, like, our senses and our mind? Like, there's non-dualists out there, or there's, like, direct realists, and then there's people who are very different theories. So, I mean, there's a huge amount of philosophy in this area. Yeah, how you doing, Roder? Yeah, so, but here we go. As always, this is my first time reading it. Let me know if you have any questions, and then as we're going, I'll try to answer as best as I can. I'm not an expert in this, but, you know, here we go. Let me know. Feyerabend himself seems never to have used the term perspectivism to designate a philosophical position. Prominent among the many philosophical categories he deployed were realism, objectivism, rationalism, relativism, and his own epistemological anarchism. Why then do I refer to his perspectivism? Because I think his views are, although retrospectively, very well characterized as perspectival. I would like, therefore, to explore what Feyerabend's work might contribute to current thinking about perspectivism. Oh, I'm sorry to hear you got dumped. That's no fun. Like, that's really icky. I mean, not saying anything about you or the person, but, like, the whole experience is ugh. So, yeah. Natty says, actually, yeah, pure reason shows most of what makes up the object for phenomena a priori for the eye, not from the object as appearing thing. Yeah, so, again, what counts as pure reason? How much do you get about that? Again, these are things that get argued about in philosophy ad nauseum. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that, Ra. It's like, no fun. Okay. Author continues, this paper has a strong self-imposed limitation. With a few exceptions, I will limit my considerations to Feyerabend's posthumously published work, The Conquest of Abundance, a tale of abstraction versus the richness of being. The main justification for this limitation is that I do not have sufficient command of his works to be responsible for the whole corpus. A second justification is that Conquest contains a chapter on perspective, although as an innovation in the history of art, not as a philosophical doctrine. A third justification is that this work represents Feyerabend's final mature thought. Finally, Conquest has not yet received very much attention. So yeah, did paper not work? Interesting, let's try that again. Oh, I used the wrong button. Thank you. Yeah, so now paper. Hey, what's up, Sock now? Okay. Yeah, see, I didn't stream for a week, and this is the sort of thing that happens. I forget my own commands. So. Okay, so what is perspectivism? Perspectivism, a perspectivist view of scientific knowledge, and you can see right here they highlighted the term scientific. So we're doing a perspectivist view of scientific knowledge. Yeah. Lynn says, Derrida talks about this cut a lot. I think, according to him, there is always a cut involved in appropriation of the thing in itself. Yeah, I don't know enough Derrida, but this is right. If you're going to start thinking in this sort of Kantian tradition, you're definitely going to have to separate out the phenomena from the thing in itself. And so there is a hard break. And this is like a good question. So, like, yep. Okay. Our perspectivist view of scientific knowledge has several levels, of which I will distinguish three. First is the claim that, as a matter of fact, all scientific knowledge claims are made within the framework of some perspective typically provided by instrumentation or theory, conceptual scheme, etc. Okay, so we've got a framework of some perspective typically provided by instrumentation or theory. So you have to keep in mind the mathematics and the concepts that you are employing in science are part of, like, you can think of them as part of the instrumentation, and conversely that the instrumentation is part of the theory. So like the idea that like you have a telescope and you're looking at the stars, that you can see light from far away using a telescope or whatever, like this is part of the theory, but it's also part of the instrumentation. And so you have to sort of get your head around, well, what is the technology of science? It's both the background concepts and the machinery you use to like perform your experiments. The separation is contradictory, one though in okay. Yeah, fair enough. Alright, a stronger version would hold that for broadly empirical reasons concerning both the world and human cognitive abilities, scientific claims must be conditional on a perspective. A still stronger claim is that there is no perspective transcendent facts that could be the object of perspective transcendent knowledge. So there could be no uniquely correct perspective. And this is usually called the God's eye perspective, or the view from nowhere. So like even if you don't like, it's like the view from like outside any one place. There is no like way to look at the world. There's just the view from outside of everything. So there's no uniquely correct perspectives, no privilege. Scientific perspectivism proceeds mostly at the first level with some gestures toward the second. I deliberately avoid the third level, not wanting to get involved with, among other things, the semantics and metaphysics of truth. A difficulty for me in reading Conquest is that Feyerabend does not distinguish these levels, and so seems to me to be operating at all three levels simultaneously. In scientific perspectivism, I argued for a perspectival realism, according to which the claims made from within a perspective are nevertheless intended to be genuinely about the world and thus realistic, even though not fully precise or complete. A contrast would be with a perspectival constructivism, according to which, even if ostensibly about the world, the determinants of scientific claims are understood to be largely independent of how the world might be. Yeah, so this is also comes up in a bunch of other places where you say, look, we might not have like access to like big T truth. We don't have access to the metaphysical truths. We have access to truths in a model, in our world, the way we conceive of it. And in those situations, we call things truths, but the situations can change. And so then the truths will like, you know, fall with, like they may change along with the model too. And so this is the constructivist version where everything is within whatever model of the world, model of science you're discussing. And that's okay. A lot of people are this way in various areas. It's not just in science. It's in like logic too. Like what counts as truth? Well, it's true in a model, not capital T true, like true simplicator. Just anywhere. And Sock now, what's up? Yeah, I'm doing like since my computer broke is terrible, but I could be more free than I think I could sell my consoles. He's at mine to move to St. Thomas Virgin Islands nearby. Hey, whatever works for you. I mean, if you want to go chill out on some islands, go for it. But I'm sorry to hear about your computer breaking. That's not cool. I mean, this computer here, and thank you Semiotics, it's running better since I got an upgraded graphics card. But like, I don't touch it. I don't want it to break, and I don't like upgrade if I don't have to. It's just I leave it to be. And you know, plenty of other things break, but I try to keep my streaming box the way it is, just so I can stream without trouble, which is easier said than done. Okay, back to truth in a model, or science and truth in a model. The primary contrast, however, is with an objectivist or metaphysical realism, according to which claims about the world are intended to be perspective transcendent, or at least framed in a uniquely correct perspective. Although I am pretty sure Feyerabend is a perspectival realist, I have some worries that he may carry perspectival realism too far. Yeah, so it's like you can say things from your perspective, but then you mean them to hold throughout the universe. One final introductory remark. Throughout his career, Feyerabend became less and less interested in technical philosophy of science and more interested in connections between science and its broader cultural surroundings. But his fundamental views cover both science and society more generally. I will focus on science, but draw on what he says more generally. 3. The stage metaphor. Feyerabend. Feyerabender? Sockna says, in St. Thomas, there is no need for a car. You can walk the island an entire day. I mean, that sounds like not a whole lot of places to go. Like, if you want to be in a place where there's nowhere to go, that's cool. But like that might get boring, I guess. I mean, it probably does sound like a Feyerabend. I see. Okay. Yeah, it's like, wouldn't you want to be able to go places? I don't know. But if you want to just sit in your room, go for it. Okay, the last chapter of the Conquest manuscript is on Brunelleschi and in the invention of perspective. It is for Feyerabend an example of how new ways of thinking grow within older ways and eventually transform the earlier institutionalized ways of doing things, in this case producing two-dimensional images. In the process, Feyerabend introduces the metaphor of a stage setting as part of his explanation of how Brunelleschi proceeded. In effect, Feyerabend says Brunelleschi created an elaborate stage setting involving an object to be depicted and the materials to be used in creating the final image. Thinking in terms of stage settings rather than conceptual schemes, theoretical perspectives, has an advantage in that it automatically brings in both the material and social conditions necessary for production. It emphasizes that these aspects of the setting are deliberately constructed for the particular purpose at hand. This is a useful antidote to thinking of epistemological perspectives exclusively in conceptual terms. Yeah, again, so we're bringing in the material things like the telescope into the concepts so that you can say, all right, we have these tools along with us. Not just conceptual terms, but like actual physical technologies. All right, we do not have to speculate about the applications to science as Feyerabend makes the connection for us. Quote, like Brunelleschi's setup, every scientific experiment involves two series of transformations and a comparison. Nature is transformed to obtain special events. These events are further transformed by data processing devices, scanners, etc., to turn them into evidence, which is then compared with the outcome of a transformation of high theory through calculations, computer approximations, phenomenology, etc. End quote. He then refers to the UA experiments of CERN in the 1980s, which led to the discovery of the WNZ particles. He concludes, quote, neither nature nor its theoretical image were faced directly. They were both transformed by complex and sophisticated processes. The notion of a stage containing projective devices omits details but retains the features needed for a general discussion of the problems of reality, the role of projections, and the associated problem of the projection-independent existence of the aspects projected. End quote. The associated problem, of course, is that we have no access to any projection-independent existence of the aspects projected. Here, Feyerabend champions a view central to my own scientific perspectivism. Stated in terms of a model-based understanding of scientific activities, the point is that in science there is never any comparison of general models with the world. Theoretical models are refined to capture the details of particular experimental setup, and these refined theoretical models are compared with suitably constructed models of the data, the direct output of the experiment. One elaborate construction is compared with another elaborate construction. The result is a model comparison, not a model world comparison. Yeah, and so this is getting into the holism problem, where you're really, it's like underdetermination. This is sometimes called the Duhem-Quine thesis, because Pierre Duhem at the turn of the 1900s, the 20th century, and then Quine later on for very different reasons. But you have to realize when something is in a system, you get this whole system. You don't know what's going wrong. You don't know what's going right. You're sort of testing all these systems. And so when you think something is going right or wrong in a system, you're not actually testing the truth of that thing in the system. You're testing the whole system. And then, so Feyerabend's point is, then we're really comparing systems. We're not comparing the results of the experiments, but we're comparing the entire background knowledge that led into creation of that experiment. Stockdale's, listen, I want the world of things, but I don't need much to be entertained. Hey, fair enough. I mean, I could go most places nowadays as long as I had, like, food and an internet connection. I'd be okay. So it didn't used to be that way. Like, you needed to be, like, in a city to, like, see movies, see new things that come out. But now you just need internet. And you don't need to be in a place where you have, like, a movie theater. You just have a laptop. You're fine. All right, perspectives on being. I turn next to Feyerabend's conception of being, referred to in the subtitle of Conquest because there is a direct line of argument from this conception to perspectivism. The concept of being plays a key role in Feyerabend's exposition, sometimes referred to as basic reality. Let me just zoom in. Getting a pain in the butt reading all these teeny words. Unreal says you need the internet, and these days, like 30 different streaming services, or just one streaming service that doesn't give a fuck about the rest of them. Yeah, there's ways around stuff. Depending where you are, like, it's not so hard. Again, if you want to get access to everything, yeah. I mean, but depends on how much you actually need. But yeah, as long as you have the internet, you can get at least some entertainment. Okay, so the concept of being plays a key role in Feyerabend's exposition, sometimes referred to as basic reality, ultimate reality, or more simply just as reality or nature with like capital R and N here. The connection to perspectivism is direct because for Feyerabend, being as it is independently of any kind of approach can never be known. For kind of approach, read perspective. So in my terminology, Feyerabend is a perspectivist. Furthermore, he is also a perspectival realist. Much of Conquest is devoted to examining the transition from the conceptual world of Homer to that initiated by the pre-Socratics and completed by Plato. Feyerabend's view seems to be that in the Homeric conceptual world, there is no strong distinction between appearance and reality. Everything, so to speak, is on the level of appearance. With the pre-Socratics, we get an idea of a reality that is increasingly abstract, removed from everyday experience. In the end, genuine reality consists of abstract objects such as Plato's form of the good. Everyday experience is mere appearance. Feyerabend takes Aristotle to have thoroughly rejected this move to an abstract reality. He is fond of quoting the following passage from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, quote, "One cannot see what use a weaver or carpenter will have for his own profession from knowing the good in itself, or how somebody will become a better physician or a better general once he has had a look at the idea of the good. It seems that the physician does not try to find health in itself, but the health of human beings, or perhaps even the health of an individual, for he heals the individual." End quote. Feyerabend generalizes to what he labels Aristotle's first principle. Real is what plays a central role in the kind of life we identify with. End quote. Moreover, we can determine the different things that can play this central role in different cultures as creating cultural perspectives on what is real. So here the perspective is provided by the elements of a culture rather than by a scientific instrumentation or theory. Yeah, and so you could say that like political technology, that's what this is. Elements of a culture, you'd have a political, institutional things. These are, like if you're in a different area of philosophy, these are just, different technologies, political technologies. Ways we organize society can also be thought of as technologies. These sorts of institutions you have. So these are the elements of culture. Did I miss something? I don't know. Okay. Feyerabend does briefly consider what he calls a more modest and more scientific formulation of realism in the form of a quotation from Einstein. 171? What is going on? Did it get cut? Huh. Interesting. We do not have maybe the whole thing. Weird. Let's see. Yeah, snippets. I'm not live, I'm undead. Correct. This is annoying. I don't understand what's happened here. And why does this freaking happen sometimes? How can we differentiate between undead and not dead? Well, I mean, undead, you might say, has lost a soul. Like, if you are undead like a zombie, then you are being controlled by somebody else. So, like, zombies have, their souls want to rest, but, like, you're being controlled by somebody else. So an undead zombie is like sort of like a marionette, like it's a tool of somebody else. And so that's the way it goes. Oh, this is annoying. I think this person put up most of their paper on their site, and it's not all of it, because it's only supposed to be 4 pages, but they only put out 3 pages of it. I'm a philosophical zombie. I'm undead. Yeah, that's fair. I'm being controlled by what? Who's controlling me there, Unreal Brian? This is annoying. I mean, if you mean the sort of P-zombie of Chalmers, I do not think I am. Let's see. In a possible world, yes. Let's see. Copy. Let's see if this is... Give me a half second. I'm just like trying to see if I can get a hold of this. Okay. My apologies. Okay, where were we? Okay, so a quote from Einstein. Yeah, so a few more pages to go. One cannot simply ask, does a definite moment for the decay of a simple atom exist, but rather instead, within the framework of the total theoretical construction, is it reasonable to assume the existence of a definite moment for the decay of a simple atom? End quote. Yeah, again, the way particles decompose has to do with all of quantum physics, not just that one atom. So author says, this may be read as the application of theoretical perspectivism and perspectival realism to a specific case. The general point would be that theoretical claims about the world can only be made conditional on a theoretical perspective. Unfortunately, Feyerabend does not pursue this more scientific form of realism, but goes on criticizing realistic claims grounded in some often implicit, I can't speak today, general worldview. He, of course, rejects the imposition of any general worldview. Feyerabend also recognizes the existence of the manifest world, the world in which human beings live, act, enjoy themselves, suffer, and die. One could say that the manifest world is the world from the perspective of common sense. Feyerabend notes that many philosophers and scientists, from Plato to Planck and Einstein, have held that this manifest world has some of the properties of a dream or an illusion. On the other side, Feyerabend says inhabitants of a particular manifest world often identify it with being. They thereby turn local problems into cosmic disasters. But being, he says, echoing the Neoplatonist pseudo-Dionysus, is ineffable. Trying to grasp it directly, we face darkness, silence, nothingness. The permeability of perspectives. Grant, for the sake of argument, that Kuhn's theoretical paradigms count as perspectives and that Kuhn can be regarded as a perspectival realist. We can conclude, at least on common understanding of Kuhn, that the transition from one perspective to another requires some kind of radical break, an unprincipled switch between incommensurable theoretical perspectives. For Feyerabend, on the contrary, perspectives are somewhat vague and indeterminate. Stockton says, naturalistic sense, we have no neurons firing. In a philosophical sense, I would say that if someone is unethical, uncurious about their perspective of the world, and if they are illogical at the same time, then yes, they are dead. I mean, I don't know if they're not dead, because they might have the chance of a reprieve, Sock, now maybe they'll get better. In some sense, maybe like a little kid is like this, or could be like this, but they might grow up. They might grow up and be better. Granted, many older people are like this, and they are not getting better, and they suck. But I wouldn't say they're dead. Ugh. I mean, you can be a bit dramatic if you want to, but yeah. Kate Parr says, it's been a while since I've read Kuhn, but doesn't he have a different theory of scientific revolutions in the social sciences where many exist at once and overlap? Yes, I think that's exactly what's going on here, but the question is, how does Kuhn view these? Like, are they real? Like, in some sense of real? And so, yeah. I mean, over. I mean, I literally have a book right here. I think there's another copy over there. This is my dad's old copy from the 70s. Deal with that later. Knock stuff over. But yeah, the question of you are right in your description, but are you right and do we understand how Kuhn thought of this stuff? And I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So continuing, this means that one can at least partly express the claims of a new perspective in terms of the old, for the new perspective is likewise somewhat determinate. Feyerabend illustrates this point repeatedly and at length, especially in part 1 of Conquest, with the case of Achilles' revision of the concept of honor in Homer's Iliad. But he explicitly draws the lesson for modern science as follows. And Kapar says, yeah, so like the perspectives are real, or the thing they grapple with if there is a consistent thing. Yeah, and so that's the issue is what counts as real. And so for looks like Feyerabend, what's going on here is that it's not so obvious at this point what exactly is real. That's why it's a perspective realism versus perspective constructivism. If it's constructive, then it's just real in the model, but the realism says it's just real in general. So yeah. All right, so this is what Feyerabend says. Following Kuhn, some have asserted that the transition from a comprehensive physical theory to its historical successor involves an act of conversion, and that the converted no longer understand the older faith. This is not what we find when we look at history. The transition from classical physics to the quantum theory certainly was one of the most radical transformations in the history of science. Yet every stage of the transformation was discussed. Did Bohr and Einstein talk past each other? No. Einstein raised an objection, Bohr was mortified, thought intensely, found an answer, told Einstein, and Einstein accepted the answer. Einstein raised another objection, and so on. Looking at such details, we realize that the conversion philosophy simply does not make sense. Yeah, and so this is the idea that there's like some massively strong break between theories. And yeah, it's fair to say that maybe this is just not accurate to how science changes. It's only something in the past that we look at, wow, the old Newtonian physics does not conceptually line up with the new quantum physics. But in practice, pieces get moved along the way. So I guess you might say this is more of a Theseus ship, where you just you take out one piece and another piece, and at the end it's a completely new ship, but it's only going in piece by piece as people discuss things. Feyerabend provided a broad summary statement of what I am calling the permeability of perspectives. Potentially every tradition is all traditions. This need not be the implausible claim that there could be a direct transition from any possible culture to any other. Rather, there need only be a possible chain of cultures leading from any one to any other. But this still may be too sweeping a claim. Yeah, so there's lots of ways things could be realized. And so it's could you actually say, replacing every little, one little step every way, could you actually make everything turn into something else? It's excessive, but yeah. Pluralism. The Feyerabend of Against Method was infamous for advocating epistemological anarchism. There was no mention of anarchism in Conquest and hardly any of epistemology in general. The only positive endorsement of a general epistemology one can find is for epistemological pluralism. Quote, so far Unitarian realism claiming to possess positive knowledge about ultimate reality has succeeded only by excluding large areas of phenomena or by declaring without proof that they could be reduced to a basic theory, which in this connection means elementary particle physics. An ontological epistemological pluralism seems closer to the facts and to human nature. Science does not contain one epistemology, it contains many. Feyerabend is not only a pluralist about epistemology, he also advocates a pluralism of science itself. The result that emerged in the 19th century was not a coherent science, but a collection of heterogeneous subjects, optics, acoustics, hydrodynamics, elasticity, electricity, heat, etc. in physics, physiology, anatomy, and practical knowledge in medicine, morphology, evolutionism, etc. in biology, and so on. In the 20th century, the overall situation is roughly the same. Thus, all we can offer today is a list enumerating the achievements and the drawbacks of various approaches, and I can identify science with this complex and somewhat scattered war on many fronts. The idea of a coherent body of scientific knowledge is a chimera. Unreal says, Unitarian makes me think of UUs, which is not what they are talking about. Universalists, Unitarian Universalists. Yeah, I thought the same thing too. But I mean, I guess Feyerabend was using it in just like the unity sense of it. What is the difference between perspectivism and pluralism? Very little. Perspectivism is the view that all knowledge claims are made from within a perspective defined by specific concepts, methods, instrumentation, etc. It seems implicit that, although at any particular time one perspective in a given area may be better than any existing alternatives, there is no uniquely best perspective. And at any given time, there may well be different complementary perspectives on the same subject matter. So it is a short step from perspectivism to pluralism. And if the possible alternatives implied by pluralism are to be significantly different, it would seem that they must be formulated within different perspectives. Maybe there is just a difference in emphasis. I mean, this at least makes some sense. They're saying, look, and this is the way I've been taught a bit, and the way things look now-ish. I mean, this is only from 10 years ago. In this area, things don't change that fast. So what goes on usually is that you have to let each science do what it does. You can't use physical, like the methods of physics, to do sociology. You just won't get anywhere, or just won't ask any interesting questions. And so you have to say, look, do we learn things through sociology? Do we learn things through, geology? Yes, we learn lots of stuff. But if you're trying to use the tools of theoretical physics, you're not going to get anywhere. And so you have to give each science sort of its due, because they learn different things and they do it in different ways. So that's a pluralism, that just science is plural. And I guess you could say, well, perspectives are a version of this, and maybe there is just a difference in emphasis. Okay, perspectivism versus relativism. Recall what Feyerabend calls Aristotle's principle. Quote, real is what plays a central role in the kind of life we identify with, end quote. Perspectival realism, as the author understands it, is a doctrine about how scientific claims are to be understood, namely as being relativized to a perspective, but nevertheless, genuinely intended to be about the world, reality if one wishes. Hapar says, there was one obnoxious physics bro who tried to do a social physics in an attempt to find general laws of social phenomena. Yeah, and I'm sure that went really, really poorly. Because if that worked, other people would do it. But, it takes one obnoxious person to be like, and we're never doing that again because that guy's a loser. So it's like, yeah. All right. So perspectival realism is not a doctrine about what is real, but about what is taken to be real from within a perspective. Yeah, what kind of life you want to live, that's a perspective. Is there a genuine difference here? Does Feyerabend actually mean is real rather than merely is taken to be real? I think he does, and if he does, the difference reveals a deep relativism in his views that goes beyond perspectivism. The author says, I can best make this point by quoting from the first essay in part 2 of Conquest. Here, Feyerabend takes on the primal contrast between religious traditions and the traditions of modern science. Quote, relativists are right when asserting that the temptation to project certain entities, gods, atoms, increases in some circumstances and is diminished in others. Given the auspicious circumstances, the entities do appear in a clear and decisive way. Socknow says, wouldn't relativism in a sociological sense be interchangeability of ideas rather and the systematization of ideas? I don't know. I don't know enough about the theories in sociology to know what they think of as relativism. I only know the ones that we deal with in philosophy, say moral relativism. Morals are relative to cultures. What one culture might think is good, another culture might think is morally wrong. And so sociological sense, I'm not even sure what that means. You'd have to explain, because I just don't know. This is stuff I don't know about. Okay. Author says, I do not assert that any combined causal semantic action will lead to a well-articulated and livable world. The material humans the material human's face must be approached in the right way. It offers resistance. Some constructions find no point of attack in it and simply collapse. On the other hand, this material is more pliable than is commonly assumed. Molding it in one way, we get elementary particles. Proceeding in another, we get a nature that is alive and full of gods. Quote, my point is that these consequences are not grounded in an objective nature, but come from a complicated interplay between an unknown and relatively pliable material and researchers who affect and are affected and changed by the material which, after all, is the material from which they have been shaped. A look at history shows that this world is not a static world populated by thinking and publishing ants who, crawling all over its crevices, gradually discover its features without affecting them in any way. It is a dynamic and multifaceted being which influences and reflects the activity of its explorers. It was once full of gods, then it became a drab material world, and it can be changed again if its inhabitants have the determination and intelligence and the heart to take the necessary steps. End quote. You know, I don't know if, like, this feels very sort of glorifying the history, like, we had gods back in the day. Oh, wow, it was a crazy life. You know, in like 1,000 years, people are going to look back at us now and be like, those idiots in like the early 20th century, they thought they had it all figured out, but they were believing all this ridiculous shit that we know better now. This is just like looking back on history is like hindsight's 20/20, and you're like, oh, but I mean, if you were probably living day-to-day life in ancient Greece, you didn't have to deal with the gods. You weren't worrying about that crap. No one was. They were worrying about, you know, getting food and water and whatever else they had to do back in the day. Same shit we're doing now, just get fed. But like, yeah. So it's like, this is I find this perspective a little weird. Let's put it that way. Because it's like, it was once full of gods and became drab material world. I feel this is moralizing history in a way that's not exactly right. Anyway, continuing. Feyerabend might object to the charge of relativism, but not much hangs on the exact label. I use it because there is no other recognized category in the neighborhood. He certainly goes beyond my understanding of perspectivism. K. Parr says, for the most, relativism isn't discussed in their experience with the discipline. The discipline realizes the problems are more complex than we will be able to analyze in its entirety, so you always make choices on things to focus on. Some theories do some things better. Yeah, sociology. That's fair. I mean, when you're dealing with a science like studying groups of people as a sociology, it's going to be like you're affecting things, how like different, it's going to be complicated. You're not just going to be like, okay, this is how all the people are. It's going to be how all of those people were, and that will relate to how other people are sometimes, but not others. So it's like, yeah, it's always going to sort of have some presupposition of relativized to the group, whatever is social at that time. Okay. Feyerabend is proposing a metaphysics of being. Being, on his view, is exceedingly, though not infinitely, pliable. In one culture, it may reveal gods, in another, elementary particles. Focusing on Europe from the time of the pre-Socratics through the first 1,500 years of Christianity, being revealed gods, first many and later only one. After the Enlightenment, materialism took over, and being revealed only matter and motion. But on Feyerabend's view, it seems that being must reveal a lot in many parts of the contemporary Middle East and Near East. And surely the Christian God should be revealed in Vatican City. And if not, why not? These and many similar questions seem not to have sensible answers. Relativizing actual as opposed to merely supposed physical existence to culture, as implied by Aristotle's principle, is too radical. There is another way to understand Feyerabend's metaphysics of being. Suppose that being has always contained all the entities that any human society might require. Which entities reveal themselves when and where then depends on the requirements of particular societies. But they are not brought into existence by culture. But the extravagance of the suggestion, even if it is indeed coherent, suggests that Feyerabend never should have gotten into the business of creating a metaphysics for being. Feyerabend likes to quote famous scientists such as Einstein regarding concepts he then criticizes. In this spirit, I offer the following quotation on the relation between truth and reality by a Nobel-winning physicist. Quote, what drives us onward in the work of science is precisely the sense that there are truths out there to be discovered, truths that once discovered will form a permanent part of human knowledge. End quote. Here, Feyerabend's basic reality is understood as containing its own truths out there waiting to be discovered. Feyerabend would surely reject the idea that such truths are discoverable by human scientists, and I suspect he might also reject the very conception of there being any such thing as truths out there. Making fun of the concept of truth, he writes, quote, "Love of truth is one of the strongest motives for replacing what really happens by a streamlined account, or to express it in a less polite manner, love of truth is one of the strongest motives for deceiving oneself and others." End quote. There is a more direct way of arguing that the idea of transcendent truths, independent of perspectives, is incoherent. Taking some hints from Nietzsche, one should begin by insisting that truth is a relation between a statement and the world. So any talk of truth presupposes a language. Truths independent of human conceptual schemes would have to be understood as related to the world's own language, so to speak. That idea, as Nietzsche points out, made sense assuming the Christian God who spoke the word into existence. The world's language is God's language. On Nietzsche's telling, Enlightenment philosophers killed God, but failed to realize that meant eliminating God's truths as well. Contemporary philosophers, including the most scientific realists, are making the same mistake. One would have to presume that discovering truths about the world required first coming up with the right set of concepts, in effect discovering the language that a Christian God would have used. Given that human languages are historically evolving representational systems and that the world is incredibly complex, that seems most unlikely, even if not logically impossible. Sockno says A. Interchangeability of ideas. B. Systematization of ideas. Example A. A dress should be worn in an office, but a pair of slacks can be worn in an office as well. B. The mission of this organization is to give more control to disabled people by independent living, so we want our organization to be decentralized in leadership and officials. Okay. So this is relativization in sociology, Socknow? A relativism in sociological sense. I see. Okay. Yeah, so if you could define that relativism within the systems, I guess. Yeah, and then you could say, look, then you're relativizing things within the system that are part of it. They could be relative to, like, different clothes you could wear. I mean, that makes sense, but it would be hard to generalize that sort of relativism because every sort of unique system is going to have its unique objects, unique terms. And you could say, well, okay, these things can be relative within that system, but that won't have any, that'll be kind of like we're in the Kuhnian discussion from earlier. How does that actually translate to any other system? Like there's an incommensurability there. Like what do slacks and pants and dresses mean if you're talking about like aliens who have no idea what dresses and like slacks are? You're putting emphasis on moral relativity in the example so it could help me. Yeah, I think I'm starting to get where you're going to, but again, like there's a difficulty here when you're dealing with systems like this to understand what is being relative to what, because there isn't like a very stable like matter. Like in physics, you've got relative motion. You're talking about motion and objects, but like when you're talking about clothes, it gets a little bit more murky. So not sure. But yeah, let me know. All right, comparing perspectives. Perspectival realism implies the possibility of there being alternative perspectives on any subject matter, but by itself does not provide any means for judging one perspective superior to another. Yet it also does not imply that all perspectives are epistemologically equal. Aristotle's principle likewise does not imply that all perspectives are equal. Some social arrangements break down, some societies disappear, but Aristotle's principle lacks any standard beyond the authority of a particular functioning society. Having repeatedly come out against method and having said farewell to reason, Feyerabend found himself left with no possibility of finding any principles for judging one perspective superior to another. Here I cannot provide a general argument in favor of any such principles, but a historical example of the kind Feyerabend often invoked can make the point that there is a reasonable form of critical judgment that goes beyond the strictures of a functioning society. The best known example of large-scale paradigm change involving a succession of three different paradigms is that from the Ptolemaic model of the solar system through the Copernican-Newton model to the Einsteinian model. In the Ptolemaic model, the solar system consists of concentric crystalline spheres containing the sun, moon, and planets, which rotate about a central spherical Earth. There is also a fixed outer sphere, in some versions opaque but having holes representing stars, revealing fire beyond. A problem for this model is that, viewed from the Earth, the outer planets, beginning with Mars, exhibit retrograde motion, appearing to move in the reverse direction from their normal orbit for Mars roughly 72 days out of every 2 years. This is an anomaly in a model composed of uniform circular motions. Yes, then Tycho Brahe, yeah. In the Copernican model, with the Sun at the center and the Earth circulating with other planets, retrograde motion is easily explained as an illusion due to a slower outer planet being observed against the background of the fixed stars from the moving platform of a swifter moving inner planet. Here, there is a clear asymmetry. From within the Ptolemaic perspective, one cannot explain anything about the Copernican model. There is likewise an asymmetric relationship of explanation between the Copernican Newtonian model and the general relativistic perspective of Einstein. Here we have a clear notion of progress that does not require positing the existence of a final endpoint, a perfect and complete model. There need not exist a fully comprehensive perspective. Relative explainability is enough. Alright, let's just finish it up. There's things to be said about that. This strategy can be applied to Feyerabend's favorite case of the gods versus elementary particles. Using the resources of contemporary social and cognitive sciences, not physics, one could explain why so many people have believed in gods and still do. In economic terms, religion provides highly desirable goods, including a source of purpose to one's life and a promise of an afterlife. Established religions provide an institutional framework for these beliefs and a community of like-minded people to provide support and encouragement. No religious framework provides any resources for explaining the scientific beliefs of modern scientists. I am not sure what exactly Feyerabend would think of this strategy for showing the superiority of scientific over religious perspectives, but I am quite sure he would reject it. Okay. So this was a little longer than expected, but still not too long. This is an interesting paper, but now what we do is we rate it. What do you think about this paper? Don't be rating my performance. Some people do that, although I guess you're free to do as you choose. But what we do is we now rate it. So if you thought this was a fun paper and made your brain dance, you give it a brain dance. So you type it in chat, you can see below. These are better TTV emotes, so they're available to anyone if you just install like one of the emote extensions, and spelling and capitalization do count. Well, I'm glad you were playing Apex with A2C Killer. I hope you had fun, Cost. But yeah, so if you thought it was fun, give it a brain dance. If you thought it was talk about existential or artistic drama sort of things, give it a scream. That's a Nog scream. Deep arranged ideas, an Ouroboros. That's a Nog Oro. Nog knife for slicing and dicing arguments. Nog navel for navel gazing, only for academics. Nog turd, all style, no substance, still poop underneath. And Nog grapes for big claims that shrivel up. Also, you can use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch, and also my vote meh. Note, I do calculate like an overall score, so if it's anything in the green makes the score go up, anything in the red makes the score go down, and the vote meh actually pushes everything towards the middle. So Tinderos gave it a yay, a brain dance, and a knife, so thank you for rating Tinderos. Yeah, this was not a bad paper. I mean, it's short paper, talking about a view of an important philosopher of science that, hadn't exactly, may not have been spelled out. The question is, what exactly, is that worth? Well, it's interesting because Feyerabend was, and as the author noted, got famous for an epistemological anarchy. Anything goes. And it doesn't look like we've got full epistemological anarchy at this point, but what we do have is we have this sort of thoroughgoing relativistic perspectivism where, you society and science goes in different directions for certain amounts of time, but it could go in a very different direction, and we don't know very quickly. Thank you, K-Pars, for rating. Meh, Ouroboros, and a scream. Yeah. Laffian says yay. Thank you. Socknow says meh and a knife. Yeah. K-Par says decent. I lost the plot a couple of times, but it made a point. Yeah, I think the author was a little bit, a little meandering at times. They were talking about what Feyerabend thinks about stuff, and sometimes it's not so clear that they had a overall picture. They were just sort of discussing, well, Feyerabend says this, and then Feyerabend says that, and this kind of makes sense, and then they threw in some quotes. It's yeah. Emil says this seemed more of an intro or book report than a paper, given that well written and enjoyable as that. Yeah. So this is more like a review sort of thing. This is not so much presenting a philosophical point, but as presenting a historical perspective that Feyerabend had, and they were sort of piecing it together from this book that Feyerabend published after he died, and tried to figure it out. So it's not bad. I mean, and I do think it got some of the ideas out there. This perspectivism, its relation to relativism, relation to pluralism, or different at least takes on relativism and pluralism. So it's like, yeah, it sort of gave a nice perspective on how you might look at current science and what we're up to. Like, we create these particles through like culture and our institutions, but like we also create lots of other things we don't see in culture and institutions, like gods and like social movements. Like, we imagine that they exist, they might not exist, and they might exist for different people. So it's like these sorts of different things can be created in different cultures. A perspective, you say? A real one or a constructed one? Yeah, exactly. So the idea here is just very, very constructed. And as a very constructed perspective, like, new ones can be constructed and old ones can be destroyed. So yeah, what do I think? Yeah, it's not bad. I'm gonna give it a vote yay. I'm also gonna give it a vote meh, because like I don't think they did a whole lot more than like, just lay stuff out, which is fine too, but like it's not like crazy stuff. What else should they get? I don't know. Give it a brain dance maybe. Sockdown says also the economic goods aspects I have issues with theologically though. Yeah. But again, this is more of a scientific thing. Yeah, so if you're coming at this from the Marxist perspective and you're thinking, hey, where's like the the proletariat, where's the bourgeoisie, where's the dialectical materialisms, like how do you actually do this? Yeah, you might have a problem with this, because this is saying, well, these things are constructions and we might get rid of that sort of goods, and you don't like that because you have a particular view on history and how things are going. So that's fair too. Like, and I think the author even said it, that people might think that Feyerabend really has nothing like helpful to talk about being. Maybe this was the wrong project for Feyerabend to be like claiming that, he was discussing the way things are. It's like, yeah. So, I mean, that's fair too. That is a sort of a rhetorical point. It's kind of clever for this author. They may actually believe everything that they're writing down here, but they're couching it in this sort of like Feyerabend close. So like you're just saying, well, this is what Feyerabend did. But they're obviously pushing this sort of topic. Unreal says, I'm always trying to proliferate reacts. If we use basic in the millennial dissing sense of the term, I'd give this a nog basic. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so like the basic bitch, this is sort of like a little bit of a basic philosophy. That's fair. But I mean, the meh kind of covers that too a little bit, Unreal. So like you can just be kind of meh about this. It's like, yeah, it's kind of basic. It doesn't go anywhere. And that's kind of one of the reasons I gave it the yeah and the meh, is like, it does sort of like, it's good, but it's kind of also, it's like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't like anything like over the top either though. So basic bitch. One of the other streamers I watch, they go by, someone called them a basic witch, in the sense that like, they're witchy, but like they're very basic. And they were like, that is the most insulting thing anyone's ever said to me. I mean, I think it was their husband that said it, but they called them a basic witch. They're just like, you're just too basic. It's like, wow, okay. Inoffensive, but not revelatory. Yeah, exactly, K-Pars. So it's like, I'd feel bad about giving it a grapes, or like because it wasn't like it made big claims that shriveled up. It just didn't really shoot very high either, and it didn't get very high. But like, you know what? That's fine. Not every paper has to be like, groundbreaking. This is a perfectly fine paper. All right, if anyone else wants to get their reviews in, now's the time. So yeah, this took a lot longer than I thought it would because it was two more like double 2-column pages than I expected, which is okay. It wasn't that long in the end, but still, I was just a little bit surprised when reading it. Yeah, I mean, there was a bunch of spots where they threw in just like stacks of quotes. I mean, that's okay in sort of a history paper, but it did kind of, break the flow of the paper. Yeah, stealth pages. Well, I didn't realize that the file I had was incomplete. So, yeah. Tindaro laughing at me. I know, Tindaro. Really. Stockton says, listen, I hear too much relativism with my side of political philosophy. Like it's obnoxious, not going to lie and give it very anti-worker sentiment sometimes. Yeah. I get that. It's like, I don't get that immediately because I don't think in these terms. I don't do the political stuff. But I appreciate that. Like when you start hearing, oh yeah, it's all relative. It's like, well, no, someone's getting fucked over. And you shouldn't be so flippant about everything being relevant when someone's getting fucked over. Because the everything relevant is quite often used as just maintaining the status quo. It's like both sides are wrong. Or both sides are equally bad. So no. There's one side that's definitely getting it worse, and you shouldn't just like give that a pass. Yeah, exactly. It obfuscates. Yeah, it's like you're saying both sides are equally bad. It's like no, they're not. They might both be bad, but one side is definitely worse.